If we lose this deal, Connor whispered, you'll be back translating restaurant menus. Rebecca didn't look at him, didn't flinch, just kept her eyes locked on Mr. Liang across the table, Zhu International's COO, who was calmly stirring his tea like it held the fate of the world. Because, in a way, it did. 12 men in tailored charcoal suits sat along the lacquered conference table in Orbis Tech's Shanghai office. Hadn't blinked since Connor barged in 15 minutes late, reeking of Palo Alto arrogance and sandalwood cologne. The man thought charm was volume and that negotiations could be bulldozed with tech bro metaphors. He introduced himself with a wink and a joke about taking this merger to the moon. Mr. Liang hadn't even acknowledged him. Rebecca spoke again, crisp and precise Mandarin flowing from her lips like a knife being unsheathed. Understand the importance of maintaining local operational autonomy. That clause would remain untouched. Mr. Liang nodded, barely. His colleagues exchanged whispers. The stakes were tectonic, a long-term logistics and AI integration deal worth $180 million over 5 years. If it fell through, Orbis Tech's entire Asian expansion strategy would collapse like a cheap card table in a windstorm. Becca had been living and breathing this deal for 11 months. Zhu International trusted her because she listened, because she understood. She knew that in Mandarin, silence was not weakness, it was strategy. She knew to bow slightly deeper than she had to let pauses stretch until the other party filled them. And more than anything, she knew how to shut up when it counted. Connor, however, did not. Let's circle back on that autonomy point, he blurted, switching to English. Think we're giving away too much here. We've got leverage, a rustle of fabric. One of the Zhu attorneys adjusted his glasses. Mr. Liang's smile flickered and died. Rebecca kept her voice level. As we discussed previously, I wasn't at the previous meeting, Connor said louder. So let's reframe it. Like it was a TED talk and not a cultural minefield where one false syllable could cost the company $250 million. Rebecca inhaled through her nose, slow and silent. She could smell the cheap plastic of the conference room chairs, the faint bleach of the polished table, the overpriced coffee burning in the hallway. It all reeked of corporate performance art, and Connor was the lead clown. She turned back to the Zhu team and said in Chinese, let me briefly explain the context. A few of the Zhu executives relaxed visibly. One even smiled. Good, she thought. Let them see who's fluent and who's flailing. Connor wouldn't stop. He leaned over to her, voice dripping with patronizing glee. Listen, Becca, you've been doing great as, the cultural liaison or whatever. But this is strategy, and that's my lane now. Her pen cracked in her hand. She hadn't even realized she'd been gripping it. Rebecca had seen men like him her entire career. Ivy League Gloss funded startups, a podcast about disrupting paradigms. They always underestimated her, until they didn't. Till the contract was signed, the ink dried, and the press release went out quoting her. Until it was too late. But today felt different. Off. There was a charge in the air like a power line about to snap. Mr. Liang cleared his throat, dragging the room's attention back to center. We were under the impression, he said in slow, deliberate English, that Miss Chang was the lead on this engagement. She was, Connor said, cutting in. But as of this quarter, we're making some changes. Still have full access to our leadership team. Leadership team? He meant himself. He meant she was replaceable, fungible, a tool to be discarded once the trench work was done. Rebecca didn't respond. She stared at the stylized Orbis Tech logo etched in the glass wall behind the Zhu delegation. It used to mean something: global innovation, cultural fluency, precision. Now it just looked like a tombstone. Outside, across the skyline, yellow-gray haze of the Shanghai morning thickened. Below, the city roared with its usual controlled chaos, horns, scooters, rapid-fire conversations. Inside, the silence curdled. Connor adjusted his jacket, a smug flick of his cufflink. Shall we proceed? He asked, clearly expecting Rebecca to translate. She didn't. Instead, she looked straight at Mr. Liang and said, in perfect, unhurried Mandarin, it's clear the leadership structure has changed. We take a short recess to recalibrate expectations. Mr. Liang gave the faintest nod. That would be wise. As the Zhu team rose, Connor beamed like he'd just nailed a quarterly report. Rebecca stood slowly, gathering her folder, her jaw tight. She hadn't told anyone, not legal, not her assistant, not even her sister, but she'd already started drawing up exit plans 3 weeks ago. A whisper from a contact at Zhu. An exploratory call. Do you ever consider? They'd asked. She hadn't answered then. But now, after this farce, after being reduced to cultural liaison while this overconfident frat ghost hijacked her life's work, now she had her answer. The moment it happened was so absurd, so perfectly idiotic, Rebecca actually thought she'd misheard him. Connor stood up mid-sentence, his chair squealing back against the polished concrete floor like it was trying to escape the scene. We're 15 minutes into the resumed meeting after the recess, just beginning to review the amended integration clause, the one Rebecca had personally drafted after 6 weeks of back-channel talks with Zhu's legal team. And then he said it. Rebecca won't be continuing with Orbis Tech, he announced, loud and clear, as if reading a weather update, effective immediately. We're undergoing strategic restructuring, and her position has been sunset. Sunset, not terminated. Not laid off? Sunset. Like she was a damn PowerPoint slide being phased out for newer, shinier template. The room stilled. Mr. Liang froze mid-pour, the stainless steel teapot hovering over his cup like it was caught in some surrealist painting. One of his deputies blinked 3 times, fast, as if trying to decode what just came out of Connor's mouth. Rebecca didn't move, her ears rang, but her face stayed blank. Not because she was composed, though she was, because her brain had immediately gone cold. Not panic, something harder. He hadn't even looked at her when he said it. Just stared across the table, talking through her like she was already erased. Connor, she said, her voice even, step outside with me. He gave a smug chuckle. No need, Becca, this is company business, and I figured transparency was better. No secrets, right? She saw it then, the little twitch in his jaw. He'd planned this. Waited until the highest stakes negotiation of the year was underway, with all eyes on the table to pull this stunt. Publicly humiliate her. Assert dominance. Cement his control. She was the chess piece he was sacrificing for spectacle. Her chair scraped back slowly as she rose, not in a rush, not reacting. Her body moved on instinct, every gesture taut with the fury she refused to show. I see, she said, turning to the Zhu delegation. Apologies for the disruption. This was unexpected. She slipped into Mandarin before Connor could interject. Please forgive this sudden development. I understand this may be concerning to your company. Liang didn't reply, but he watched her, not with confusion, not with pity, with interest. Rebecca caught that flicker behind his eyes, like he was watching not a car crash, but a metamorphosis. Connor cleared his throat. Let's stay on track, he said, clapping his hands together. Got a proposal on the table. No one moved. Liang raised one hand slowly, like a conductor calling silence. Then he spoke to Rebecca, not to Connor. May I ask, he said in Mandarin, tone light but laced with precision, what your next role will be? The breath in the room shifted. Connor's brow furrowed. He didn't understand the words, but he understood he was no longer in control. Rebecca met Liang's gaze and felt a strange calm settle in her bones. Kind you feel after the storm has already taken your roof, when you realize all that's left is what you choose to rebuild. She adjusted her blazer, tilted her chin just slightly. I haven't decided yet, she said in Mandarin, her voice low and certain, but I'm open to new partnerships. The Zhu team glanced among themselves. Connor, still clueless, tried to redirect. Listen, we can translate later. Let's focus on the deal. But the room was no longer his. Liang stood, slow and deliberate, and addressed his colleagues with a single word. Chinese letter, Chinese letter. Break. They rose in unison, leaving their folders untouched. Mr. Liang lingered just long enough to glance back at Rebecca and offer the barest nod, respect, not sympathy. As they filed out, Connor turned to her, voice low and triumphant. You should have seen this coming. You were overpaid and overhyped. Rebecca looked at him then, not angry, not broken, but clear. Just fired your only translator, cultural bridge, and the architect of this entire deal, she said. All to prove you have a dick. He snorted, enjoy job hunting. She smiled faintly. I already got an offer, Connor, 3 weeks ago. I turned it down. He paused. His smile flickered. She stepped forward, leaned in. I think I'm going to accept it now. The door had barely clicked shut behind the Zhu delegation before Connor started talking again. Fast, loud, trying to fill the space like a man scooping water from a sinking boat with his bare hands. Let's get ahead of this. I'll have legal draft a statement, loop in PR, maybe frame it as a transition we'd been planning. Rebecca, I'll even let you. You're not in the room anymore, Connor. Rebecca didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words landed like a pin drop in a cathedral. He froze. That same twitch in his jaw came back. He hadn't quite wrapped his skull around the idea that she wasn't going to cry or beg or storm out in a blaze of HR emails. She just stood there, still in her seat, calm, hands folded neatly over the contract draft like it was Sunday tea. I don't think you get to decide that, he said finally, stepping closer. Oh, but I do, she replied, standing. Because in exactly 60 seconds, this room will not belong to Orbis Tech anymore. Then the door opened. Mr. Liang returned. Alone, no assistants, no translator. He looked at Rebecca, not Connor. Then in Mandarin, he said, would you be willing to continue the discussion independently? Rebecca didn't miss a beat. Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter, Chinese letter. I'd be delighted. There was a pause. Liang looked over her shoulder at Connor, whose mouth had just parted to protest. Liang raised one hand. I would appreciate it, he said, till in Mandarin, slow and formal, if Orbis Tech's representatives could give us the room. It wasn't a request. It was a surgical strike in silk wrapping. Connor hesitated. I'm sorry, we're still the Mr. Liang's eyebrow arched. The contractual relationship appears undefined at the moment, a beat. And then, like a man suddenly aware he'd stepped onto a frozen lake that was cracking beneath him, Connor stepped back. Fine, he snapped. But this isn't over. You're right, Becca replied without looking at him. It's just beginning. Connor lingered at the door for a second too long, then vanished like a bad smell into the hallway. Silence returned. Liang sat down across from her. Rebecca didn't speak right away. She let the air settle, let the moment breathe. Then, as if flipping a mental switch, she slipped back into Mandarin with ease and elegance. The proposal still stands, she said, turning the folder to face him. With one change, my title. Opened the folder and pulled out a clean sheet of paper. No Orbis Tech logo, no watermark. I'm now operating as an independent consultant. All the terms remain intact. My compensation would shift to a success-based model, 10% payable upon contract execution. She pushed the paper forward with a manicured finger. Liang's mouth twitched, not a smile, something deeper. Recognition. You already had this ready? She allowed herself the softest smirk. Say I've been prepared. He nodded once. The man who'd said maybe 20 words the entire week of negotiations suddenly unfolded his arms and leaned in. For the next hour, they talked. Really talked. About supply chain integrations, hybrid AI licensing models, joint logistics planning. About the cultural philosophy behind Zhu's decentralized hierarchy. About the ways Orbis Tech had been fumbling the trust they'd once built, trying to treat China like an expansion instead of a collaboration. Rebecca spoke the language, not just Mandarin, but their language. The unsaid language, the pauses, the subtext, the deference that came not from weakness, but from respect. And Liang noticed, they all had. By the time his deputies returned, Rebecca had redlined the contract, noted 3 adjustments Zhu had quietly hoped for, but never dared request from Orbis Tech, suggested a phased rollout schedule that would give Zhu more leverage with their regional partners. Mr. Liang stood and extended his hand. This, he said in Mandarin, is how business is meant to be done. Rebecca shook it, not with relief, not with pride, but with quiet power. Because the moment she'd crossed that line, stood her ground, claimed her value, and shed the dying skin of Orbis Tech, wasn't an act of survival. It was a declaration of war. Morning after the negotiation, Orbis Tech released a statement, so generic it could have been copy-pasted from a toothpaste recall. We thank Rebecca Chang for her contributions and wish her success in future endeavors. As part of our global restructuring initiative, Orbis Tech remains committed to excellence in international partnerships. Commitment, apparently, now came in the form of a slap-together task force of underqualified yes-men and a hastily hired Mandarin interpreter who pronounced Guangxi like it rhymed with nacho cheese. Rebecca read the press release on her phone while sipping oolong in the corner booth of a dim tea house in Zhuhui. She scrolled past the LinkedIn vultures, already liking Connor's post about leaning into disruption and navigating difficult transitions. She didn't comment. She didn't repost, just quietly filed the whole thing into a folder in her mind labeled fodder for later. What no one at Orbis Tech knew, not PR, not legal, not even Connor, was that Rebecca was already on her second meeting that day with Zhu's legal team. The contract they signed wasn't with Rebecca Chang. It was with RC Global Partners Limited, a Singapore-registered entity that had existed on paper for less than 72 hours. Shell brand. No press, no traceable ties. Just a P.O. box, a burner phone, and a sleek black and white logo designed by a freelancer in Prague. The only web presence was a minimalist one-page site that read, Precision in Chaos, Global in Reach. Quiet by design. It was a shell, yes, but it was hers. And behind that shell, the work had already begun. Flashback. 6 months ago, Zhu had first floated the idea in a hallway during a tech summit in Chengdu. Mr. Liang, rare glass of beiju in hand, had leaned in and said, if you ever want to build something of your own, we'd invest. She'd laughed then, told him she was loyal to Orbis Tech, that she liked the challenge of corporate politics. His reply, a challenge is only noble if it's winnable. She hadn't realized how unwinnable it had become until Connor waltzed in with his startup stink and sunset strategy. Now, RC Global wasn't just a consulting firm. It was a scalpel. Zhu International was her first patient. They moved quickly. No formal announcement, no press release. Just quiet red lines, revised strategies, back-channel memos. Every email came from a burner account. Every invoice from a shadow payment platform. Meanwhile, Orbis Tech spiraled into spin mode. Connor held emergency Zooms with their remaining APAC clients, mispronouncing names and overpromising deliverables. He tried to replace Rebecca's years of trust building with a new PowerPoint deck and a 3-day cultural sensitivity seminar. It didn't go well. Clients didn't say no. They just went quiet, missed meetings, delayed signatures. One by one, they began drifting, like marbles rolling away from a broken bowl. Rebecca didn't poach. She didn't need to. She whispered. She emailed one former client a link to a white paper she happened to write that solved a pain point Orbis Tech had ignored for years. She sent another a polite note in Japanese, mentioning that a new firm specializing in adaptive market entry had recently become available. She knew every pressure point, every weakness in Orbis Tech's portfolio. She'd built the damn thing, and so she began unbuilding it, not loudly, not with lawsuits or headlines, but quietly, methodically, like erosion. Each client she lured away became another stitch in the skin of RC Global. Zhu funded her retainer and made introductions. A German logistics firm asked her to audit Orbis Tech's AI framework. A Singapore startup offered her equity for help navigating China's export law. Rebecca operated like a ghost. No social media, no office. Just encrypted calls at midnight, signal chats with CEOs, long walks through parks where no one could overhear. Every time she passed an Orbis Tech ad in the airport or heard Connor's smug voice on a conference panel, she smiled. Not because she missed it, but because she was turning their kingdom into her quarry, brick by brick, deal by deal, name by name. And no one, not Connor, not legal, not even her old assistant, had the slightest clue. Yet, the first sign of panic came in the form of a calendar invite. Subject, urgent Jew account transition, call mandatory attendance, sent by Connor's executive assistant at 3:14 a.m. East Coast time. It hit inboxes like a silent scream. At 9 a.m. sharp, 7 Orbis Tech execs logged into the call, bags under their eyes, ties crooked, sipping coffee like it was morphine. Connor joined last, sweaty and overdressed in an aggressively blue blazer, trying to mask desperation with corporate cheer. "All right, team," said, flashing a grin like a chipped veneer. "Let's get ahead of this narrative." But there was no narrative to get ahead of, because Zhu International wasn't returning their calls. Not to confirm a meeting, not to clarify timelines, not even to reject anything. Just static. Connor had already assigned a replacement for Rebecca, someone from the London office named Laura Beasley, who spoke fluent French but could barely pronounce Nai Hao. Introduced herself in an email chain Zhu didn't acknowledge. She followed up twice, then 3 times, then stopped entirely. Connor called Liang's assistant directly. The call was sent to voicemail. He pinged Zhu's business development lead on WeChat, left on read. He emailed their in-house legal. The message bounced back. Recipient has left the organization. Connor didn't know it yet, but Zhu was gone. They had simply left the building without slamming the door, without a note, without a word. Meanwhile, Rebecca was in a rooftop bar in Singapore, redlining an expansion agreement with Zhu's Southeast Asia partners while sipping a lychee cocktail and listening to a jazz cover of Smells Like Teen Spirit. Every time her phone vibrated, it was a new whisper. A Shanghai AI startup that used to be tight with Orbis Tech wanted an exploratory call. A Tokyo client emailed to say they missed her voice. German VP she hadn't spoken to in months asked if she was still freelance. She responded to each one the same way, a quiet hello, a reminder that discretion was guaranteed, and a file named Proposal RC Global V1, PDF. Back in the glass box that passed for Orbis Tech HQ, Connor was unraveling. He stormed into HR like a Wall Street cliché in a B-movie, tie loose, pupils dilated. "We need to shut her down." Now, your HR analyst, fresh from grad school, still believing in systems, asked what grounds they had. "She's breaching contract," Connor barked. "She's working with former clients. That's IP theft or something." But the analyst scrolled through her screen, confused. "Her termination paperwork's not here." "What? There's no final separation filed. She was removed from payroll, yes, but no formal exit documents. No signed NDA. No non-compete initialized. Nothing uploaded to the compliance tracker. It's all marked pending." Connor's face drained of color. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that we fired her, but never finished firing her?" I think the assumption was that you were handling it personally, since it was a strategic leadership decision." Connor spun away before she could finish, muttering profanities under his breath. By 6 p.m., legal was looped in. By 8 p.m., confirmed the worst. Rebecca had no enforceable non-compete. No confidentiality clause tied to her exit. Nothing preventing her from contacting clients, advising, even reusing her own materials. And the best part, she knew it. Because in her final days at Orbis Tech, long before Connor decided to nuke her in a boardroom power play, she had requested a contract audit from HR, citing title change confusion. She had the emails, the metadata, the proof that they knew, and now she was weaponizing it, quietly, elegantly, like silk pulled through skin. By Friday, 3 more clients had gone dark. By the following week, whispers inside Orbis Tech turned into murmurs, murmurs into panic. Project managers were left holding half-translated contracts. Product leads were ghosted mid-deployment. Junior account execs started crying in the bathroom after her Korean client demanded to speak to Miss Chang or no one at all. Connor tried to spin it in the Monday leadership sink. "Look, there's a vacuum right now. These clients are just confused. They'll come back," but no one believed it, because Rebecca wasn't just winning. She was erasing them. The email came through encrypted Proton Mail at 2:47 a.m., tagged urgent in all caps, a burner address that only existed for the hour. It took her to open and read it. Subject: they're coming after you. I thought you should know. Rebecca tapped the screen slowly, eyes scanning the message in the blue glow of her Singapore apartment's bedroom. The Marina Bay skyline glimmered through the window behind her, but her attention was locked on one line from the anonymous tipster. Legals drafting a retroactive non-compete. Connors pushing for backdated enforcement. Wants to frame your client contact as corporate sabotage. She stared at the words for a long time. Then she smiled. It wasn't joy. It wasn't surprise. It was the smile of a chess player who realizes their opponent is about to walk directly into a checkmate because they forgot they moved first. Rebecca closed the email, stood up, and padded barefoot to the home office across the hall. She powered up the sleek, custom-rigged tower she used for sensitive work. No cloud, no logs, just raw local firepower, and a mirrored backup drive locked in a hidden drawer. From a labeled folder titled Orbis/contractual/term/revisions, she opened a PDF dated 6 weeks before her termination. It was an internal compliance request. To HR at Orbistech Corp. From Rebecca Chang at Orbistech Corp. Subject: confirmation of contract update following title adjustment. The message was polite. Meticulous. It asked for documentation regarding her contract obligations after her VP title was restructured under Connor's strategic vision. HR had promised to follow up. They never had. A week later, she followed up again, and again. 3 emails, 1 official Slack ping, all saved, all timestamped. No NDA, no non-compete, no addendum filed. And then came the nuclear core, a CC'd message from Connor himself, sent 2 days before the negotiation implosion, saying, "I'll take care of Rebecca's exit. We don't need to waste legal's time. Just cut her access." It was overreach. Corporate vanity dressed in efficiency. And it was fatal. She zipped everything into an encrypted archive and attached it to an email. To Alina Baisha, Attorney Corporate Defense, Subject: potential escalation, please review. Attached. The second email took longer to draft. Natalie Huang at BusinessWeek.com. Subject: Orbis Tech's quiet collapse for your eyes. Only Natalie Huang had reached out months ago, back when Rebecca was still at Orbis Tech. She'd been sniffing around layoffs, missed targets, questionable back-channel deals. Rebecca had politely declined to speak then. Now was different. Now, she wasn't protecting anything. She was clearing the runway. The email was surgical, not bitter, not dramatic. Just a breadcrumb trail of receipts, dates, threads, actions taken, red flags ignored. She mentioned that an internal audit had been quietly requested by several shareholders regarding strategic miscommunication in a pack. She included one line at the bottom: "If you'd like to see what a weaponized oversight looks like, call me." Then she closed the laptop, walked into the kitchen, and poured herself a glass of still water with a twist of lime. She didn't toast. He didn't post anything cryptic on social media. This wasn't a victory lap. This was positioning. Later that morning, Alina called. Her voice was sharp, dry, surgical. "They're bluffing," she said. "Connor's legal threat would evaporate in discovery. We have documented intent, failure to execute, and demonstrable harm if they try to retroactively pin this on you." "Good," Rebecca said, "but I don't want them to back off." Silence. "Then, what do you want?" "I want them exposed. I want this mess named. I want every investor who backed Connor's so-called vision to see what it bought them." There was a pause. Then Alina's voice shifted into the cold hum of compliance machinery. "Understood." By the end of the day, Natalie Huang responded. "I've heard rumors, but this is smoke with a bonfire underneath. I'd like to meet, off the record, for now." Rebecca leaned back in her chair, crossed one leg over the other, and stared out at the late afternoon skyline, its glow bleeding into the horizon like a match held to paper. Let them come. Let them draft their desperate legal memos, their boardroom lies, their late-night PR spin. She'd already prepared the blade, and now they were walking toward it. The press didn't scream, it whispered. It started with a 5-line blurb buried in the international business section of the Straits Times. Zhu International has entered into a strategic partnership with a boutique consultancy based in Singapore. Sources close to the matter say the firm will oversee Zhu's Asia-Pacific integration strategies moving forward. No name. No logo, no direct mention of Orbis Tech, but insiders knew when RC Global's IP address pinged on 3 different data rooms that used to belong to Orbis Tech. They knew when Zhu's procurement team issued a blanket cancellation of all pending license renewals. They knew when the legal department at Orbis Tech received a 7-word reply from Zhu's COO: "We are moving in a different direction." By noon, the whispers reached New York. By 4 p.m., Orbis Tech stock had dipped 6%, low volume but sharp twitch in the bloodstream, enough to catch the eye of traders trained to smell blood under the perfume of quarterly optimism. On Slack, Orbis Tech's packed channels were ghost towns. No client updates. No wins. One post simply read, "Does anyone know where Laura Beasley is?" No one replied. At 6:18 p.m., Business Week published an article. Title, Orbis Tech in Transition. What's behind the Zhu disengagement? It was soft. Careful, kind of story that doesn't burn the house, just flicks a lit match at the curtain. But halfway down, buried in the context paragraph, was the first crack of thunder. Sources familiar with the deal suggest Zhu's new advisory partner includes former Orbis Tech executive Rebecca Chang. Rebecca was in Jakarta when it dropped, waiting in a quiet tea salon tucked behind a rooftop co-working space. Her assistant showed her the article on an iPad. She didn't flinch and smile. She simply sipped her jasmine tea and asked, "Have they issued a response?" "Not yet," the assistant said. Rebecca nodded once. "They will." Across the ocean, panic bloomed inside Orbis Tech like a gas leak. Connor paced outside the glass walls of the executive suite, barking into a phone, sweating through a monogrammed dress shirt. "We need a statement, a denial. Something, anything," but legal stalled. PR ghosted. And investors started calling. The dip had turned into a slide, 9% by morning. Not catastrophic, but sharp enough to rattle the board. Shareholder chats lit up with phrases like negligence and structural incompetence. That afternoon, Rebecca's phone rang. Private number, old ringtone, she answered. "Rebecca, it's Martin leaving, early investor, founding board member, and tore from her early days in San Francisco when she was still doing 15-hour strategy decks and drinking gas station coffee for dinner." "Didn't expect to hear from you," she said. "You always knew when to keep your powder dry," he said. "I respected that." There was a pause, wind noise on his end. Then, with the gravity of a man who'd seen too many balance sheets bled out by ego, "Can we meet?" She didn't ask why. She simply said, "Singapore or Hong Kong?" "Hong Kong." "Quiet place? No reporters. Tomorrow?" "I'll send the plane." They hung up without goodbye. Later that night, Rebecca walked the length of Clark Quay alone, the city humming soft and humid around her. She passed glowing billboards pushing Orbis Tech's latest AI rollout. Seamless futures, powered by us. But the image felt brittle now, like a mask melting in the heat. She wasn't dancing yet. She hadn't uncorked champagne or written her final line, because the climax wasn't a headline. Not yet. It was a meeting. A hand extended in private, and a chance to aim higher than she ever could from within the gilded cage of Orbis Tech. Connor's hands shook as he flipped through the printed NDA packet, dozens of pages, legally dense, all bearing the same curious line buried deep in the boilerplate. RC Global Partners Limited. May be consulted independently for strategic oversight, subject to mutual confidentiality. It was there in black and white, in contracts signed 2-3 months ago, dated after Rebecca's firing, filed by former Orbis Tech clients, now officially ex-clients, and worse, most of the documents had been sent to Orbis Tech's own compliance team as a courtesy. Connor slammed the folder shut and barked at his executive assistant, "Get me a call with legal. Right now." But legal was already on with Martin leaving. Connor stormed into the shareholder meeting 2 days later like a man expecting a mutiny, but still hoping he could bluff through it. "Before we begin," he said, trying to smile, "I want to address some noise that's been circulating. There have been unsubstantiated claims about client relationships, specifically involving a former employee." "Let me be clear, you mean Rebecca Chang?" Someone interrupted flatly from the back. Connor froze. Eyes scanned the room. Investors, board members, senior stakeholders, not a single ally in sight. "She's working with our largest former accounts," he said, voice tightening. "She's violated the spirit, if not the letter, of her exit agreement." Martin cleared his throat. Connor turned, his posture shifting like a kicked dog. "Martin, I was just about to." "No, you weren't." Martin stood slowly. "You were about to spin it." He pulled out a leather folder, unbuttoned it, handed a stack of documents to the general counsel, seated at the head of the table. "Emails," Martin said, "from you, confirming you'd handle her exit personally. No HR involvement, no contract finalization, no legal oversight. You fired her mid-contract without process, and now you're blaming her for walking out of a door you left wide open." Connor's mouth parted, no words coming out, just that soft static silence that falls when a man realizes his spotlight is no longer a stage, it's a heat lamp. Another board member flipped through the documents. "She was never bound by a non-compete," he said. Martin nodded. "And her firm is doing precisely what we used to hire her for, only better and for more clients." Connor tried to recover. "So what? We just let her dismantle us from the outside?" "No," Martin said. "We ask how she did it, why we let you run things straight into the ground while she quietly ate your lunch." Silence. Then, softly, "She's agreed to testify at the ethics review next week," Martin added, voluntarily. A ripple moved through the room. Connor's face cracked, panic creeping in under the lacquered smugness. "You talked to her?" he asked. "You reached out to her personally?" Martin didn't answer him. He looked to the others. "She's calm." focused, uninterested in revenge, fully prepared to clarify what she experienced here, what we all missed while chasing quarterly illusions and inflated leadership resumes. Connor looked like he'd been exiled from his own body. Later that evening, a junior board liaison reached out to Rebecca with a quiet offer, a high six-figure settlement if she would agree to sign an NDA and walk away from the ethics review. She declined in 2 sentences. "I'm not looking for money. I'm looking for truth. See you Tuesday." She didn't CC her lawyer. She didn't BCC the press. She didn't need to. This wasn't scorched earth. This was clean air, and she was finally breathing it. It dropped at 7:03 a.m. Singapore time. The headline was surgical, precise, bloodless, and terminal. Implosion at Orbis Tech. Insider accounts reveal chaos, cover-ups, and one consultant's quiet coup. Byline, Natalie Huang. 10,000 words, names, dates, memos, screenshots. Rebecca's name appeared for the first time in public as the founder of RC Global Partners Limited, the boutique consultancy quietly absorbing Orbis Tech's Asia-Pacific portfolio one contract at a time. The story traced everything: the silent exits, the client migrations, the missing paperwork, the weaponized incompetence. Connor's public firing stunt immortalized in a subheading: strategic restructuring or executive ego. Within 2 hours, article trended on LinkedIn, Bloomberg, and Twitter. By noon in New York, Orbis Tech stock had dropped 18%. Trading halted by afternoon. The quarterly earnings call, scheduled for 9 a.m. Eastern, was already dead before it began. The call opened with static. Then a voice, someone from investor relations, trying to spin a narrative of unexpected headwinds and client realignments. But every analyst on the line had already read the exposé. One was buying the script and more. And Rebecca, she wasn't listening. She was sitting in a glass conference room 47 stories above Raffles Place, sunlight bleeding across the marble table, Singapore humming below her like a heartbeat. Across from her, on a crisp, lag-free video call, sat Ju's North American expansion team, flanked by legal, operations, and translation. She didn't need the translator. "We're thrilled to finalize this agreement." Man on the other side smiled and replied in Mandarin. "It's not every day we get to say we're closing the largest logistics integration deal in our company's history." The numbers were staggering, nearly triple the size of the original Orbis Tech deal. 3 regions, multi-currency, multi-year, full strategic control delegated to RC Global. No middlemen, no weak links, no Connor. Her assistant entered silently, setting a tablet beside her. On screen, a live graph showing Orbis Tech's market cap bleeding red across the hour. A push notification blinked at the top. Connor Baines placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Rebecca tapped it closed without reading further. She looked back at the call. Calm, measured, certain. "We'll begin implementation next week," she said. "You'll have my full team, direct lines, no bottlenecks." She paused, then tilted her head slightly. "And this time, we do it right." Team on the other end nodded. Papers shuffled. A contract was lifted and shown to camera. The final clause was read aloud. She leaned forward, scanned it one last time, and signed. The call ended with polite farewells and muted applause. She stayed seated, alone now in the center of the high-rise quiet, surrounded by clean glass and still air. She exhaled, not relief, not victory, just truth. No title, no office politics, no man to frame her success as his idea. Just her name, her clients, her rules. From below, the city moved on, buses and bikes and heat and breath, all pulsing beneath the tower like a world she no longer had to fight to belong to. She picked up her phone, opened her calendar, and scheduled her next boardroom for Tuesday. Then she smiled. Let's begin. Thanks for joining the fun, you office survivors. Subscribe for more switch-flicking drama. Let's make your former coworkers sweat.